Good morning. I hope that's working. I tried to test it earlier. Should be able to hear me. Good morning. Good morning. Today is Sunday, February the 27th. Thank you for joining me on another beautiful Sunday morning. It's a little snowy, so it's actually not that beautiful unless you're in the winter sports, but I'm sure some of you probably are with the Winter Olympics ending. Everybody's all pumped for snowy winter fun activities, right? That's how that works, right? Pardon me. Oh, come on, computer. Hold on a second. This week has been an interesting week, hasn't it? Certainly in our day-to-day lives, it's been a pretty normal, regular week. But if you watch the TV or if you frequent the bad parts of the internet, then you've probably heard the news that we're on the verge of some sort of war or something, crisis in Ukraine, and obviously there are some terrible things happening. Obviously, I think we all have some sympathy. Our hearts go out to the people in Ukraine who are suffering or whatever is happening there. Because obviously nobody wants to see people suffer unnecessarily. That being said, I think that this is a learning opportunity, a teachable moment, a let's look at this and take it apart a little bit moment. And specifically how it relates to real estate investing, but also how it relates to general goal setting and trying to achieve things in your life, and specifically how those things relate to what's happening in the Ukraine right now. I have a book I've been reading this year. I feel like I've said that a lot on the seminar, but I have a book I'm reading this year. Another one that I haven't mentioned on the seminar as yet, and that book is called The Daily Stoic. It's just a short book of little meditations. Basically, every day you kind of read one if you're following the book. Anyways, and it's all this wisdom and sayings and aphorisms and stuff from the past. The Stoics were a group of philosophers, if you're not aware, who lived thousands of years ago, right? Seneca College is named after Seneca, one of the most famous and greatest Stoics. So they had a big impact. You know who many of them are, even if you don't realize they're Stoics. And anyway, I'm reading the book. It's a pretty good book, just little tidbits of wisdom. And in the book, today of all days, today's little blurb, February the 27th, is it's a quote by a famous Roman philosopher. He actually was born into slavery. Well, he wasn't born into slavery because you couldn't be at the time, but his parents were enslaved. He grew up in that circumstance and was sold into slavery when he came of age, because that's how things worked in Rome. And so he basically grew up enslaved. Now, of course, slavery means different things at different times and different cultures. So don't necessarily compare that to the modern conception of like American slavery, because slavery in Rome was a little bit different. But all the same, he grew up a slave. And he worked really hard his entire life, first to earn his freedom and then to earn his fortune and eventually to become one of the most powerful and influential men in Rome. You can imagine that wouldn't have been an easy thing to do 2,100 years ago, whatever it was. But he says this thing, and I thought that this was a very, very poignant thing. I'm going to read kind of the translation, and I'll try and read this quote, but they're also old-timey, and they hardly, Anyways, the translation is, cultivating indifference where others grow passion. And he says, of all the things that are good, some are good, others bad, and yet others indifferent. The good are virtues, and all that share in them. The bad are the vices, and all that indulge them. The indifferent lie in between virtue and vice and include wealth, health, life, death, pleasure, and pain. What he's saying here, of course, is that you can be a good person or you can do good deeds. You can do bad deeds. Those are obvious. And then everything else in life is kind of neutral, right? Like beyond a certain point, I think if you're poor, it's a moral failing, right? Like if you are so poor that you must depend on other people, and if there's no reason why you find yourself that way, then that's a failure on your part because you should not be a burden on those other people, right? But if you're able to take care of yourself, but you're just, whatever, lower class or whatever, but all your needs are taken care of by your efforts, then you're not really any worse than the guy who's a billionaire, right? As long as you're taking care of yourself, your relative wealth it's not really a virtue or a vice, right? It'd be a vice if you're a sloth, if you're lazy, if you're sitting there not doing anything, having other people take care of you. But as long as you're taking care of yourself, really, after that point, who cares how wealthy a person is, really, right? And so that's kind of what he's saying, right? And he's pointing out here that for most things in life, they don't matter, even the big important things. If you think about the last time you were in an argument with somebody, and you were all heated and you're upset, whatever it is. Your girlfriend didn't turn the dishwasher on. Your boyfriend he didn't do something he promised to do. Whatever it is, right? Your coworker, they had a work task that was obviously theirs to do, but they effed it up, or they didn't do it, and now you've got to deal with their crap, right? It causes an argument, or maybe someone cuts you off in traffic. That's the one that gets me. I get some pretty fiery road rage, and I know it's not good, but maybe that's the thing, right? Whatever it is, and think about how personally you take that, how upset it makes you, angry, frustrated, unhappy. Think of all the impacts it has on your emotions, and then consider, prior to my asking you to recall this last argument or disagreement, how important was this thing to you? How much have you thought about it since it occurred? The honest answer to that question usually is it wasn't very important. It didn't matter that much. And no amount of yelling, screaming, or being upset actually ended up getting me what I wanted, right? That's the truth that we all learn sooner or later in life, right? When you're a kid, screaming and yelling, it might get your way once in a while. But as you get older, you realize that the other adults, they don't care how much you kick and scream. And that ultimately, like, complaining at that level, it's not fundamentally very effective, right? Well, I wanted to talk about that for two reasons. This week I was reading a little bit about Japanese mythology. I think Japan's a very cool country, super racist for the record. For anybody who wants to criticize our country, Japan doesn't let in non-Japanese people, with very few exceptions. And most of the people who do live in Japan who are not Japanese are there because they came from the American military base or otherwise connected to the American military occupation there. So, fun fact, the Japanese are incredibly xenophobic people, but very cool culture all the same. And in their culture, they have a symbol. The kabuto, you've probably heard of that. Certainly if you like Pokemon, I think there was a Pokemon named Kabuto something. Kabuto is very common, and if you've played a lot of games, you've probably come across it in other places. There's Kabuto armor and various different things from Japanese mythology and from Japanese history, okay? And the Kabuto is a beetle. It's a dung beetle, or it's a variation of the dung beetle. Technically, the dung beetle lives in Africa, but it's a variation of the dung beetle. And this is one of the mightiest beasts in Japan, is this lowly little dung beetle. And it's very interesting because it holds a very, very high place in Japanese culture, right? They really, I can't speak for all Japanese people, all 80 million of them, but in that culture, they seem to really revere the dung beetle. I thought that was interesting, and I wondered why. Japan is the third or fourth, depending on who you ask, largest and most powerful economy on the earth, right? This is a very influential country. This is a country who was a backwards kingdom of peasants who had barely figured out metallurgy 250 to 300 years ago. because they completely cut themselves off from the world on their island for like 2,000 years. And then America came and invaded their country and said, no, we don't care what you want. You're now participating in the world. And that was a rude awakening for the Japanese because the Americans had guns, and again, they barely knew metallurgy, so they only had some swords. And the Japanese people responded to this incident in a way that I think is very, very interesting. I'm going to compare and contrast it, actually, because I also started watching a television show called Yellowstone maybe 2 weeks ago. And people have told me it's really good, and I've watched it, and you know what, it is very, very well made, and it looks beautiful, and if you're looking for something to watch, you won't go wrong with it. It's kind of preachy Amazon-y stuff, though. There's a lot of kind of social justice preaching in it. And anyways, the show features about cowboys and Indians kind of a thing, and so it prominently features Native American people, and so there's a character. She's a young woman. She's Native American, and basically, she lives on a reservation that's like gutter trash. Like, her brother was recently murdered there. There's her husband was involved in a shootout with like a meth lab, and like it's bad. It's bad where she lives, right? And so her father-in-law, a white man, tries to arrange for her to leave the reservation because she has a son, his grandson, of course, and he thinks the situation is very dangerous. And so he is a person of great influence, and he manages to find a university, whatever, that is willing to hire her and take her on, because she's a teacher of some sort, take her on as a teacher at their university, where she'd be paid really well, and she'd be given like a housing stipend, and basically her life would improve greatly, and she'd have the chance to go to university and learn things and teach and blah, blah, blah. She says no, because it was taking gifts from the white man that got her people there. And that's a very interesting commentary, and certainly whatever, if that's how you feel. But I want to compare that now to Japan and this dung beetle mentality, because Japan, you know, not to make any unfair comparisons, but if you were going to choose whether to be Japanese or Native American, there's no one on earth who choose to be Native American, right? Except for the Native American people, maybe they might pick it. But the rest of us, who are being a bit more objective, would say obviously things are better in Japan than they are on the reservations. And I think that that's very interesting, because Japan has a similar, if not worse, history than the Native Americans do when it comes to colonialism vis-a-vis the Americans, right? America literally went to Japan and was like, this is our first attempt at being colonists. If you look in the history, America didn't colonize like Europeans did, right? They were a colony. And then when they got their independence, they were like, hey, this kind of looks like fun. Let's go. So they built a navy and they went to Japan and they quote unquote colonized it, which of course, funny term because there were people there already, but whatever. And they completely kicked Japanese butt. I mean, the Japanese couldn't compete at all with their guns and their modern organization, their ironclad ships, and it was basically a massacre. And you look at the history, that's basically what it was. So the Japanese people were shell-shocked by this, and obviously their island was taken over by the Americans. And you have to remember, they'd had a culture that had decided to be insular and just stay on the island and ignore the rest of the world for like 1,000, 1,500 years. The last time they left the island, they got into a war with China, and things went really, really badly for them. That's the history of Japan. So all of a sudden America comes in, destroys this like image of peace and freedom and kind of, you know, we're on an island, the ocean protects us, that they have, takes over their land. And the Japanese people respond by recognizing that the Americans are superior to the Japanese. So first thing they do, they go, oh, shoot, you Westerners are superior to us. Absolutely. My katana cannot compete with your rifle. Can't do it. That's the first thing that they do. They say, okay, you're better than me. The second thing they did was say, I'm going to learn everything that you know. Japan immediately, once America had opened Japan to trade, Japan immediately began to send people from Japan to America, from Japan to England, from Japan to Italy, from Japan to Germany, to go learn the things that the people knew in those places. And they did. In fact, one of the reasons Japan is the fashion capital of the world is because Japanese people went to England, which at the time, London being the fashion capital of the world at the time, and that's where they learned to make suits, tailored suits. So one of the reasons why the suit industry is so prominent in Japan is because they just went to England and stole what they were doing. They said, "Oh, you guys do this better than we do," and they learned it. And not only did they learn it, but they mastered it, so to speak. Right? Obviously, the Japanese are very, very good at many, many things. And that culminated after about 80 years of adapting. That culminated in World War One, where, well, not really World War One. I guess it would have been the Sino-Russian War, the war between Japan and Russia. You probably didn't learn about it in school. We didn't talk about it here in Canada, but Russia and Japan had a war prior to the World Wars, and Japan completely beat down Russia pretty bad, and they did so using European. I mean, obviously, weapons don't have a nationality, but they're using the designs and the technologies that had been developed in Europe. The Japanese had taken them and used them for themselves. And they ended up becoming one of the world's greatest powers. And obviously, we know in World War II what they were able to do and unfortunately what happened to them. But ultimately, Japan never relinquished its grip on being a world power once it got a taste of what was possible. The reason I want to highlight this story and this mentality of the Japanese is it's to point out something that I think it gets missed a lot, especially if you're listening to these, the kind of brain dead, the social justice-y kind of people. The world is a complicated place. It's nuanced. It's full of competition or predation, and bad things happen. That's just a fact of life, right? The question is not whether or not a bad thing is going to happen to you or has happened to you or will happen to you. The question is, what are you going to do when the bad thing happens, right? And our society is full of people and stories where somebody gets kicked, perhaps really, really hard, and they are down, and life is not being very fair to them, and they pick themselves up, and they, against many or all odds, they succeed, right? I think of that movie, and of course it's a movie, so, but I think of the movie The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith, right? That is based on a true story. It is about a man who was homeless, and he worked really, really, really incredibly hard to not be anymore, and he did eventually succeed. I think of Elon Musk as well. I think I've told this story on the seminar before, but Elon Musk, when he was starting SpaceX, they launched the first rocket, it blew up. They launched the second rocket, it blew up. They launched the third rocket, and it blew up. And he was out of money. There were no more rockets. He bought 3. He didn't have any more money. Tesla was on the verge of bankruptcy, right? Because this was 2007, 2008. All of his money was being drained by negative cash flow in Tesla and by these 3 rocket failures in SpaceX. He had no money left. And yet he went out, he figured out some credit, he borrowed, he was able to get one last rocket. And obviously the rest is history, right? He was very successful. He's been very successful since then. But I mean, at one point in 2007, 2008, Elon Musk was sleeping on his friend's couch, right? Like, keep in mind, right? Elon Musk being broke is not the same as me being broke, right? He still probably had several zeros at the end of his bank balance, but he didn't even have a place to stay because he literally sold his house and everything so he could keep Tesla and keep SpaceX running, right? So a lot of the times we look at somebody like Elon Musk or like the Pursuit of Happiness guy or like really anybody that we look upon who's had success in their life. And we only see the shining thing, the success portion. And of course, they pay the price for that. And the price was paid in time, and it was paid in effort, and it was paid in perhaps a little bit of suffering. That's kind of the nature of life. And the Japanese people, the reason why they revere the dung beetle so much, they probably wouldn't like it if I referred to it as dung beetle. But I mean, that is technically what it is. But anyways, the reason they revere this beetle so much, or the beetle so much, is because beetles have that same grit and persistence, and they're also incredibly strong. There's some other interesting things about beetles, why they like them. But one of the great things about the dung beetle is, I don't know if you're familiar, they roll up balls of poop, right? That's what they do. And they'll start with a small amount, and they'll roll it, and it will get bigger like a snowball until they've rolled up such a large ball of poop that it's bigger than they are, and they can hardly roll it anymore. And it's a combination of a practical thing because they eat it, and also a mating thing because they can show off to the female beetles that they've got the biggest ball of poop. Very strange. And that's what these insects do. And of course, if you knock away their ball of poop, well, they'll start to make another one. They're persistent, right? They have grit. They're determined. They do not turn away from a task or an obstacle. They keep going until they rolled up their ball of poop. And it's a very, very impressive thing for a society to look at and say, this is what we admire. And of course, that's what the Japanese people did. And you can see the society that they built, right? Obviously, even through all the hardship that so many cultures around the world complain about, Japan faced very similar hardship. Keep in mind, only place in the world to ever be nuclear bombed twice, right? And yet they're a world leader. And so it's very fascinating to see how hardship hamstrings some people and it hardly affects others, right? And I think a lot of that comes down to their attitude and their mindset. So I know you're probably wondering to yourself, what does this have to do with real estate investing and investing in general? And I wanted to start by talking about that because I think that grit and persistence are very, very important, especially mindset pieces for real estate investing. This week I myself made some progress in my own real estate investing career. I was trying to raise some private money. That's it. It's nothing crazy. But I saw some success in that. And it's something that I've been trying to do now for some time, this particular project. And I've gotten no's. I've gotten several no's over the last maybe year and a half that I've tried to put together. I've gotten a lot of, I don't think that'll work, or I don't think that that's possible, or I don't know. But ultimately, things are starting to come together. It looks like things are going to go the way I wanted them to. It looks like. Fingers crossed. Time will tell. But that made me really focus on this idea of grit and dedication and persistence, right? And maybe also a little bit on the ideas of insecurity and putting effort into things, right? And so this week, we saw Putin invade Russia or Ukraine or whatever. I don't even get too much into details. I don't want to get too much into details with what happened. But there were some things that happened on the world stage, okay? I've got nothing to say about those things in terms of I don't know who's right or wrong. I could tell you a lot of history about the Ukraine and Russia that you probably are not hearing from the mainstream media right now. That would definitely enlighten a little bit on what's going on. But this isn't the news program. I'm not here to teach you about their problems. I just want to talk about the problem in general. And the problem in general, as I see it, is that the Russia-Ukraine thing is 100% a distraction. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's made up. I'm not saying that it's false. I'm not saying any of that. No. That's the greatest thing about distractions in life is you don't use false things to distract people. You use real things to distract people, right? And why do you distract people? I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why a polity might want its people distracted. One of them is that distracted people are not watching the prize, right? One of them is that distracted people are not paying attention to the ways in which they are being screwed or ripped off. One of the ways is that if you distract people, especially with an opponent, right, then you can focus their hostility on the supposed opponent, and then they might ignore the nefarious behavior that's happening in their own backyard, right? Shoot. Actually, on that point, I just thought of something, and I'll just include it really quickly. There's a Netflix documentary. It's about a young girl being molested. It's this horrible documentary, and I can't remember the name of it right now. But maybe Natalie can type it into the thing if she knows. It's about a young woman who she's like a part of like a Mormon family or an LDS family, something like that. And this predator, he befriends the family. The story is so crazy that it's so. Anyways, Abducted in Plain Sight. That's the name of the documentary, called Abducted in Plain Sight. The story is so crazy. It's about this guy who. Sorry about the dog. It sounds like maybe someone's front door. It's about this guy who befriends this family, a very, very religious. Hang on a second. Sorry, Amazon just delivered a package, and my dog hates the Amazon man. Abducted in Plain Sight is about this man who he befriends this Mormon family, and his objective from the beginning, as far as we can tell, this is a true story, was to molest the daughter, who's like 8 or 9 years old when he meets this family. So him and his family move into town. He meets the father of this family, and he befriends him. This guy's like a psychopath, right? And he's very personable. He's very charming. So he befriends the dad, and through the church and whatever. And then he befriends the mom, and then he befriends the little girl, and he's trying to get himself alone with the little girl. So he's offering to take her on trips and do these different things that, like, any person you'd think you'd clue in, like, right away. Like, why does this strange man want to take my daughter to Waterland or whatever? I don't know. But these parents are half-wits, so they're not really paying attention. Of course, this guy, he's a psychopath, and he's there to manipulate, right? So he's distracting, right? So he's coming in, and he's distracting the parents with various different issues so that they're not paying attention to their daughter. And this culminates, I'm gonna spoil it for you, I'm sorry, but it came out like 10 years ago, so I hope you don't mind. This culminates eventually in basically the father kind of, I don't know if confronting the guy is the right term, but basically, like, I guess asking some questions. So the dude convinces the father that actually he's gay, and all of his everything he's been doing was to try and sleep with the dad. So he gets the dad to perform sexual favors on him, and so that distracts the father from looking at what's happening with his daughter. I know, weird. And then the mother starts to get suspicious, so he sleeps with her because he convinces her that really all of this attention has been about trying to get with her. So now dad's distracted because he thinks he's got a new boyfriend. Mom's distracted because she thinks she's got a new boyfriend. And this guy convinces them that he needs to take their daughter on some trip. I don't remember the specifics. And he ends up abducting the kid and, like, molesting her for like 1.5 years or something. It's some horrible story, convincing her that they were aliens and they had to procreate. And you were really asking for it, huh? That they're aliens and they got to procreate and all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. The rest of it doesn't matter. The part of the story that is essential, that's important, is that this person came into a situation. He had nefarious intentions, right? To achieve his objective, right? He could not be honest or truthful or straightforward about what he wanted, so he needed to deceive his victims. And you will notice in this case, he used it's particularly egregious all the way around. Hang on a second, let me get rid of this dog. I'm sorry. You gotta go. You gotta go somewhere where you're gonna be less vocal. Sorry about that. This man used basically every tactic he could think of to distract so that he could extract what he wanted from this family. And sadly for this young girl, he was successful, and unfortunately for her, her parents were half-wits, to say the least. It's not funny, but it kind of is, because, like, how does that situation happen? Anyways, distractions are things that sick people use to try to get what they want. It's just a fact of life, right? And again, they use real things, right? So to go back to my example of the molester, he really slept with the father. He really slept with the mother. He didn't, it wasn't fake. It was a real distraction. He just didn't actually care about sleeping with either of them. And he was so obsessed with trying to sleep with their 11-year-old daughter that he was willing to engage in gay and straight sex with people he apparently wasn't attracted to, just so he could get to his objective, right? So this is obviously a very sick individual, and most people are not at that level of sickness. But issues come up and they're used as distractions, because when you're distracted, you're not paying attention to what matters, right? That's just the general rule in life. Muhammad Ali said, when he was jailed for abstaining from the Vietnam War, that he didn't know, I'm paraphrasing because Muhammad Ali was such a great speaker and can't quote him exactly, but he didn't know any Viet Congs, who had called him the N-word while he was crossing the street. He didn't know any Viet Congs who'd come to his house or his family and given him a hard time, right? He didn't know any Viet Congs who told him that he could only go into the colored people section of the bar or the colored people's bathroom, right? He pointed out that while it's true that on TV and such, the Vietnamese people are our enemy, and maybe they even are, maybe this is even justified, maybe they really are bad people, and to be clear, the Vietnamese communists were bad people, so it probably a war we shouldn't have been involved in, but also the people we were fighting were not righteous. So it's just like the stuff in the Middle East now. We probably shouldn't fight wars with these people, but they're not good people or anything, right? The Taliban, it's maybe not our business, but they're not good people. Same thing in Vietnam. But he pointed out that this has got nothing to do with me, and I'm not going to participate. You're trying to distract me. Now, he ended up in jail as a result of his views and his beliefs. Nobody said doing the right thing was easy. But he recognized that, hey, this is a distraction. This is trying to pull me away from the things that are important in my life to focus me on the things that somebody else thinks are important in their life, right? Similarly, we now have a situation in the Ukraine. Is there really a situation in Ukraine? Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't know. I'm not there, but you show me a video of things blowing up, maybe. I mean, I watch Star Wars and things blow up, and I know that's not real, so it's hard to say for sure. But, on balance, I, of course, will accept the news, relatively, as relatively true, at least. The question is what's happening in the Ukraine with Russia important? Right? The question is not whether or not it's happening. This is important. I'll tell you something. In China, they've killed millions with an M. That is one with 6 zeros behind it. Millions of Uyghur Muslims harvesting their organs, sterilizing their women. I mean, the things that China is doing are truly atrocious. They're awful. Modern day Germany. Nobody talks about it because Germany didn't make cool things like China does. So we all want their cheap crap. So we just allow them to do this. But they've done this over the last decade or so. Millions with them. Okay? And none of you care. I don't care. None of us care. I mean, I care in the sense it's horrible, and I care in the sense I think China is an awful, degenerate place, right? But it doesn't affect my day-to-day life. I'm not stopping my thinking or changing my plans as a result of it, right? So now Putin's doing a horrible thing, allegedly, right? And we're all supposed to stop what we were doing. Like, I thought that last week we were in the middle of a trucker protest. I guess it was ending because Justin Trudeau was using brutal force or whatever. And, we were having conversations about vaccine mandates and the things that were happening here in our society that affect us. Our economy, perhaps, something that everybody's just forgotten about for the last 3 years. But now here comes a convenient distraction. So you will see the media pivot to focus on the distraction, regardless of whether or not it is actually valid or in any way related to your life. One of the things that I find very interesting about the Russia-Ukraine thing is the Russia-Ukraine dispute is very similar to the Canada-Quebec one. It's a matter of separatism. Ukraine's not a real country. It's not. It is today, of course, but it didn't used to be. 2/3 of Eastern Europe didn't exist prior to World War II, right? These are places that we made as a result of the war. And I'm not saying it wasn't a good idea to make them. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you made them. And now there are people who feel that they lost out in the making of these new polities, saying, no, that's not right. This is always a part of my country and my culture, and I'm not okay with this. And that's the situation that Russia is in, right? The Ukraine was never its own independent thing. It was a part of Russia. Did you know that the USSR had 75% of its nuclear weapons in the Ukraine? Why would Russians do that if they didn't consider the Ukraine to be a part of their thing, right? So it's a very interesting history of how the Ukraine emerged. It was really our machinations, and now we're treating the Russians like they're villains because they're not happy with the situation. And I think that they are villains. They should leave. They should leave the Ukraine alone because I think that violence is usually not the answer, right? But I do also look at my country and think I don't think we have the moral high ground to stand on to tell you that you're wrong for wanting what you want. We send horses in to trample ladies who just want to go back to work. I mean, we're just not in a position, right? All of this is to say, how much have you allowed the news, impending World War II or three, sorry, not two, World War III and all that other crap, how much have you allowed that to distract you from analyzing properties, from making offers, from talking to realtors, from strategizing on your borrowing, right? Talking to a mortgage broker. How much have you allowed these things to drag your mind away from the things that will make your life better and drag your mind into thinking about things that you can't control, right? Because I want to point out to you, the Japanese, when bad things happen, focused on themselves and said, what are my flaws? What can we as a society improve at? And they went out into the world and they learned their deficiencies and they made them their strengths. You're not a country, you're an individual. But all the same, you go out into the world and you are good at some things and you are bad at some things, and some things you need to learn and some things you need to practice. What do any of those things, the good, the bad, the practice, the learned, have to do with Russia and the Ukraine? Right? What do they have to do with Hurricane Henrietta? Right? What do they have to do with global warming? Right? You'll notice that the media likes to inundate you with information about things which you cannot control, things which you cannot have an influence over, because ideally for them, you are powerless. You're not powerless. You're actually incredibly powerful. If you set your mind to something, you can make really incredible things happen, right? But people want you to believe that you're powerless. It's a certain kind of sickness in our society, if I'm being honest. We like to neuter dogs, we neuter animals, castrate them and what have you. And the idea is that you make a more tame, less aggressive animal, right? By definition, a less dangerous dog. Of course, a well-trained pit bull is loyal, caring, supportive, and will protect the shit out of your family, right? So why would you want to take away the thing that would make it so protective, right? Well, it depends. You, as a member of a family, probably would not. But I, as an outsider to your family, who does not want to worry about your stupid pit bull perhaps attacking me, I don't want you to have the power of that dog, because it means that I can't victimize you as easily, right? And ultimately, at the end of the day, right, the media is very, very, very much about victimizing, right? Not only are they about it in the literal sense that they love victims and they love a victim story, but they're about it in the sense that the information that they give to you is not actionable, right? Hopefully, when I talk to you on these seminars, perhaps not today, but most days, I give you actionable information, right? I say, hey, this is how you analyze a property. Hey, these are the things you need to look out for. Hey, this is who you talk to, or this is where you go, or this is the type of person you look to, or this is the service that you require. And if you can do these things and you can take action on them, then you can improve this particular thing. I can't promise you anything about your life. I'm not saying you'll be better looking or anything like that, but this particular narrow thing that you want information about, this will improve. This is how you do it. This is how you move forward. And if you focus on those things, they will pay dividends in your life, right? You'll notice that the news media, it does not do that. The news media does not give you simple, actionable steps for how to improve your life. You'll notice if you watch the news media, this is an example of a news media commercial. Are you feeling anxious? Have you been feeling a little bit uneasy with the world? Did you know that there are earthquakes, hurricanes, typhoons, and mosquitoes that will give you parasites that eat your eyeballs from the inside out? Because if you didn't know, you might be growing butt cancer. You should check out the new pills that they have. That's the media. That's their presentation of things, right? It's like, oh, do you have anxiety? Let me give you 100 more things to be anxious about. Let me put you at unease. An uneasy mind does not make good decisions usually, right? And so this is a very important thing, right? We have a society full of people who feel like they are capable of accomplishing more, but who also feel as if for one reason or another, life is not allowing them to reach their potential. I'll tell you right now what the reason most of those people are not reaching their potential is. It's because they watch too much TV. And I do not mean that in the sense that, you waste time watching television. We all waste time doing something or other. If TV is your vice, then, there are worse things, because you could definitely be doing, the kinds of deleterious drugs that ruin your life, like fentanyl or something, right? So it's not the worst vice in the world, but it's something that we all participate in. But it's not just that the time gets wasted watching the TV or the news or the this or the that. It's about the damage it does to you psychologically. It's about what it does to your mindset. It's about what it does to your ability to look at the world and clearly evaluate it, right? If I go back to my boy Epictetus and his quote at the very start here, I was telling you about the Daily Stoic, right? He points out to us that there are virtues and there are vices, but most things are indifferent. What's happening in Russia is a perfect example of indifferent. It does not matter. You know what? Even if, let's just take this example to the extreme. Let's just say that tomorrow the situation in Ukraine is going to escalate, and Vladimir Putin is going to push the button and he's going to launch 15,000 nuclear warheads all over the world, basically ending the world. Let's just say. So that's tomorrow. What are you going to do about it? You going to fly to Russia and assassinate Putin? You going to go catch his nuclear weapons? Like, there's nothing you can do. It's not under your control, right? So it's a complete waste of your time and effort to stress about it. And if it happens, that sucks, obviously. But there's nothing we can do about it. And if it doesn't happen, which is the most likely outcome, what was the benefit of wasting any time or energy worrying about it? What was the benefit? You know, one of the things that I just noticed in general is that people today are very timid. They're very afraid to take action. Everything you have to second guess, you have to question, you have to doubt. I was speaking to a business owner. They're in their mid to late 80s now. So this was a business a long time ago. And they used to run just a diner here in Mississauga-Etobicoke border, back before Mississauga or Etobicoke really existed as we think of them today, when the city was a much, much smaller place. They were telling me about running this diner, and basically they were serving truckers, long haul truckers doing the like Toronto, Montreal, and back. And they were just explaining how, they used to run their little shop, and, they charged 25 cents for like eggs and bacon and a coffee and some hash browns, and they would sell tobacco and liquor, and they were open 24 hours, and they were doing all these things to kind of try to make ends meet, right? Try to make a living. And they were doing all right for themselves. And, they were talking to me about how difficult it was, saving the money and working with people, and you'd have employees stealing from you, and, various different things that happened over the course of their many, many years in business, right? And one of the things that really stood out to me was how most of the things that they were telling me are no longer possible. Or I shouldn't say that, because that's not quite true. Many of the business practices that they were telling me about today, you would have to check with daddy government before you could do those things, right? Certainly, like, when's the last time you went to a restaurant that sold tobacco products? They don't. But they used to. Why not? I don't know. Because the government said that smoking's bad for you and you're too stupid to make a decision for yourself, I guess. Something like that, right? Which, smoking is bad for you. You probably shouldn't do it. But also, like, it's not my place to tell you how long you want to live for or what you want to do in your time. If you want to smoke your life away and you want to live, a shortened life, that's between you and your maker, right? So anyways, I was listening to all of this, and I was just like, our world has changed so fundamentally, because today people are of the mindset that you must ask for permission to be great. You must ask for permission to do. You must ask for permission to act. I mean, people literally sit by, there's been a car accident, and they sit there looking at each other, trying to decide who's got the authority to step in and help the person, right? And what we all need to take a step back and a second back from all this damn brainwashing from the damn government and the media, and I mean that in the least like the least strong sense, but we're caught up in this illusion that there's someone who's in control and there's someone who's in charge, and there isn't. You are free. You have the power right now to change your life and the lives of other people in both amazing and horrible ways. Do you remember that prick who drove the van down the street in Toronto? That was somebody who woke up and said, I have the power to change the world. Now, he decided to change the world for the worse. But he demonstrated quite clearly that he does have the power, doesn't he? He ruined the day for an entire city. He killed however many people. certainly he made an impact on however many families that day, right? You have an immense amount of power. You do. The only question is whether you'll wake up to it. And granted, don't use a lot of it. Like, there are a lot of things that are in your power. Don't do those things. They're bad things, right? Don't run people over with cars. Don't get frustrated and you know, whatever, blow things up or whatever. You know, obviously use your power for good, particularly buy some real estate, invest, grow your wealth. But understand that you are incredibly powerful. I think I probably sound cheesy right now, but really and truly, I mean, let me put it to you like this. The brain of Elon Musk conceived of a car and shot it into orbit around this planet. That brain runs on the same salt, fat, protein, and sugar as yours does. Okay? You are capable of doing the same thing. Men and women worked hard to build precision-guided intercontinental nuclear ballistic missiles so that they could shoot a rocket from Wyoming and blow up a city in Southeast Asia, right? Same brain as the one that you have. You are capable of changing this world fundamentally if you want to. It's not going to be easy. The world does not want to be changed, but you have that power. You have that capacity. And every day the media works as hard as it can to make you forget that fact because they are afraid. They are deathly afraid that A, you might choose, like that young man, to use your power to make the world a worse place. But B, that unlike that young man, you may choose to use your power to make the world a better place. And a world that is a better place is a world that doesn't have a lot of space in it for the types of people that exist in our media and our government. They don't particularly want that, right? And you see this all the time. I mean, literally for the last however many months, they've been vilifying Elon Musk, right? He doesn't pay his taxes. He's a deadbeat. He's this, he's that. Yeah, obviously, these are really silly people, but nonetheless, these are the things that get said. Why do they get said? Again, because Elon Musk is one of those shining beacons that he reminds people. He goes, oh, yeah, you got lots of power in your life. Like, I flew to Russia and bought some nuclear missiles. Think about that. Before Elon Musk did it, and you might not even be aware that he did do that, but Elon Musk went to Russia and he bought nuclear missiles. Just so we're clear, he didn't get the nuclear warhead, but he did get the missiles. Before Elon Musk did that, did it ever occur to you that you lived in a world where it was possible for you to go somewhere and to buy an intercontinental ballistic nuclear missile? Like, it never occurred to you. That option was not presented by the media or by your teachers or by your professors. You know, I want to go back to William Nickerson. William Nickerson is, of course, the gentleman I was telling you about a few weeks ago. He wrote a book, How I Turned $5,000 into $1 million by Investing in Real Estate. He did this 100 years ago, in the 1920s, right? Just after World War II, during the Great Depression. That's when he started. And he points out that he was college educated. He'd gone to college. And in college, he took an economics course. He had an economics professor. And after he got the inspiration to invest in the real estate, he spoke to that college professor because he figured, you know, economics professor is going to know a thing or two about making money. And you know what that economics professor said to him? He said to him, William, I would caution you against this course of action. All of the easy ways to make money have been found. There is nothing but the dregs left for investors today. That's what he told the man. He told him straight up, you are not going to make any money. William ignored him completely. And he went and he did his thing anyways. Now, not only was that economist wrong, but that economist mispredicted one of the greatest expansions in real estate wealth in probably the history of the world, as America emerged unscathed from World War II as one of the only industrialized nations in the world, and suddenly everything they had was incredibly valuable. William obviously did very, very well for himself, right? And so that's my point, I guess. It's kind of long-winded this week, but the media, in all of its incarnations, even the people who are just telling you about the weather, are professional naysayers. That's what they are. They're that professional prick who sits there and questions whether or not you can do something. And you know what? A lot of the times that prick, I've been him a couple times, is right. You can't do it. But they're wrong that you shouldn't do it because you can't do it. You know, just because you can't do something, maybe what that means is you need to practice. And practice means doing, doesn't it? Right? So that person who points out that, oh, you're not very good at something, you probably should avoid that. Well, they're the worst kind of bad advice, right? Because actually what you need to do if you're not good at something is you need to practice it, right? You need to sit there like Japan and say, okay, we may have lost the battle, but how can we improve to win the war? And, you know, to Japan's credit, I guess they never won the war because they ended up getting nuked by America 100 years later. But technically speaking, Japan's been at the forefront of world culture and world economy for the last, 30 to 50 years. Obviously, brands like Toyota, Honda, Nissan are world renowned. We all know them. Mitsubishi, Sony, Panasonic. Like you can go down the list. Japan's had a monstrous influence on the world. And so it's hard to say that they're not winning. I mean, granted, they never got to punch their bully squarely in the eye because America, you know, America was a lot to take on. But they almost did. I mean, they certainly kicked them in the balls once or twice with the whole Pearl Harbor thing. And secondly, obviously, they managed to build a world post-war, post-conflict. And how many of us have had conflicts with people where, you know, after the conflict is over, you realize, oh, that person's actually all right. Like, we could actually be friends. We can get along. We can find something that works. We can find common ground. America and Japan were able to do that. And the Japanese were much, 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 much better off for it. So I think all of this is a very long-winded way to say that grit and determination and really crystallizing your vision and making sure that you strive for it, those are the things that are going to paint success for you. I've been looking at some comps for one of the properties that I bought a few years ago, and the property is probably up 100 and something percent. I mean, it's not clear, right? Because they're comps, so it's hard to say if my property will actually be marketable for that amount or not. But like in a couple of years, 100% gain. I wish I could tell you I had $1 million in there, so I now would have two. I don't, unfortunately. But you know, whatever the amount was, I did really well. And I'm not telling you that to brag or because I want you to think, oh, Aaron's smart. No. I'll tell you this right now. To be honest with you, I could have done the deal smarter, could have been better managed. I think you could have made a lot more money. There are people who would do a better job than I did who'd make a lot more money on this deal than I am making. I'm not perfect. Obviously, this week I forgot to remind you about the seminar, right? None of us are perfect, right? But I go out, I made an effort, and I've been dedicated and devoted to it ever since. And I mean, I've made the effort multiple times now, but nonetheless, it pays dividends. It pays dividends. And I think one of the things that a lot of us struggle with in life, I know I do, for sure. Maybe I can't speak very well. I'll just speak for myself then. I struggle with this. Sometimes past Aaron is not very nice to present Aaron. Sometimes he leaves a mess, and I got to clean it up. Sometimes when he was a lot younger, maybe he didn't pay his bills, and I had to fix his credit, right? Or maybe he wasted money on something stupid like a car or some video games when it could have been put somewhere else, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The list is long of Aaron's flaws, at least in Aaron's mind, right? And I'm sure all of you maybe feel similar. Maybe I'm more neurotic than you, so I think of more of my flaws. But ultimately, right, we're all aware of ways in which we could be better in life, but we're falling short of our vision for ourselves, right? And I think that that's very troublesome because what we do is we now look back at our track record with ourselves and we say, oh, well, Aaron, you son of a gun, you screwed me last week when you didn't clean up the bathroom and then I had to do it. And oh, Aaron, you lazy SOB, you fell asleep in front of the TV, so I had to rush to get things ready in the morning, you know, going to work. Can you tell these are real things that happen? Whatever it is, right? Or maybe, again, I'll go back to the credit thing. I'll tell you, at one point when I was really young, or when I first got out of high school, whatever, going to university, I made some mistakes with credit. A lot of people do, right? And I kind of ruined my credit. Ruined is a strong word because I have an excellent credit score. So, but at the time, it was bad, right? And I had to work very hard to fix it. And it's very easy to look back at, 20-year-old Aaron and say, what an idiot, idiot, jerk, self-centered, whatever. And all of those things are probably true, but they're not helpful. And I think we look back at our record with ourselves, our history with ourselves, and we go, oh, you know what? You're such an idiot. You're a screw up. You're a this, you're a that. It's very easy to highlight all of the failures and the flaws and to say, you know what? I'm going to screw this up too because I screw everything else up. And you know what? That's probably true. You probably will screw it up. I know I will. I've made a mess of lots of things. The question is not so much whether or not you're going to screw something up. We mostly screw things up, especially when we're starting out, right? The question is whether you're going to stick with it long enough for you to straighten out the thing you screw up. Right? I'll give you a perfect example. When you were a kid, you learned to ride a bike, hopefully. And if you did, if you're lucky, you had nice parents who bought you like training wheels and stuff so you wouldn't fall down and skin your knee. If you weren't so lucky, you had parents who were a bit more realistic and they were like, well, screw it, you're going to skin your knee. But either way, they put you on a bike and the bike didn't balance. And they said, you've got to go or you won't be able to stay on the bike. And of course, you're a dumb kid, so you don't go and the bike slows down and you fall off and skin your knee because this is the process of learning to ride a bike, right? But you hop back up because you were too young and too stupid to know that this is a bad idea. Right? You hop back up on that bike and you try it again. You kept trying because you wanted to be able to do it because you saw mommy or daddy or your big brother or sister or whatever riding around on their bike and you're like, I can do that too. So you get back on the bike and eventually you figure it out, right? You eventually figure out how to ride the bike. The problem so many of us have is that we spend so much time focused on our track record with ourselves of all the times we didn't get back on the bike that we forget that if you just keep trying, eventually you will learn to ride the bike, right? And here, especially with real estate investing, I think more so than any other kind of investing I've ever looked at, and I've looked at a lot of it, it's so hard to screw this up. Yeah, granted, I mean, you could be an idiot and like speculate in Toronto and buy a house for $2 million that interest rates go up and now it's worth 1.5. You can do that. It is possible to get burned. There's no question, right? But if you're looking for the right things, if you're investing for cash flow, I guarantee you find a house that makes zero cash flow. It just has neutral cash flow. You're going to make money on it every single time. You're going to make money on it every single time. And if you find ones with positive cash flow, you're guaranteed to make money on them, right? Will you make money on them year one? Probably not. I didn't usually. I don't usually, I should say, right? Usually that first year, you know, you're figuring things out and there's kinks and things that need to be worked out, right? But this is a long-term game, right? And that house that you buy year one that didn't make you any money, I don't know, for any of you who own a house that you bought for investment purpose that first year and it didn't make any money, and that's probably all of you who bought a house like that. Did it really bother you that much that at the end of that first year you hadn't made any money off it? Probably not. Also, probably it's not true you didn't make any money off it. You just didn't make any cash money off it, right? Like you look at how much the mortgage is being paid down and other things and you go, okay, well, there is some money for me in here, right? So next week, I'm going to focus on kind of the technical. We're going to do like a lot of analysis, and I'm not going to talk so much about mindset, but I noticed on YouTube, I like to listen to YouTube on my commute because I can't stand like the radio and that kind of thing. And I noticed on YouTube this week that, you know, I listen to a variety of stuff on YouTube. You know, sometimes if I just don't want to deal with the world, maybe I'm listening to some guy play a video game and just it's whatever. It's just kind of background noise. And most of the time, though, I like to use YouTube to learn things. I like to listen to investors. I like to listen to interviews with people like Elon Musk and that sort of thing. I'm sure a lot of people like to use YouTube that way, right? And I noticed this week that obviously when the whole Russia-Ukraine thing happened, a lot of YouTubers who I have a great deal of respect for and whose content I really appreciate, I noticed that there was this pivot where they felt the need to talk about the Ukraine and Russia. And I think a lot of people feel that, right? I've noticed at work, you know, people come in the day after it happened. Oh, well, you know, it looks like World War III is coming and oh, Russia, this and that. Everybody's trying to act like they're smart because they can repeat to me what was broadcast on the evening news last night. And it's like, there's nothing intelligent about you pivoting in your life from whatever priorities you had yesterday to now Russia and Ukraine is the biggest deal in your life. Like literally doesn't matter. People were dying in the Ukraine the day before it was announced that Putin invaded and you didn't care. It didn't matter to you. And I don't mean that in a negative, harsh way, like you're a bad person because you don't care. No, I mean it in the true sense of like it was not a factor in your life. Don't let it become one. You have things in your life that you choose that are your priorities, that are important to you, that you know if you focus on these things, they will make your life better. Do those things. Don't worry about the other stuff. That noise is there to distract you. And not only is it there to distract you, but if you allow it to distract you, then you will never have the power to impact these things, right? Like if you say Ukraine, Russia, terrible situation. Well, what are you doing about it, right? You're some peasant. At best, if you're lucky, let's just say you're really lucky. And I don't think anyone listening to me is this lucky, but let's just say you're really lucky. You're top end peasant here in Canada. You're making $500,000 a year in your salaried job, right? That sounds really good, probably to a lot of you, right? Like that's probably not where any of us are coming from. Guess what? That person making $500,000 a year has zero influence over the situation. Zero, none whatsoever, right? If you empower yourself, then you will have whatever modicum of power that you get from self-empowerment. If it's nothing more than having the resources to say no when our government comes knocking and says, I want to sign your son up for war, and you say, no, we're good. I'm not sending my son off to your stupid war. If enough of us had the personal, financial, economic, and ethical power to say no when the government came knocking to take your son nowadays or daughter off to war, there would not be wars. I know this is a shocking revelation, but if we all stop participating in the awful stuff that our governments do, then they cannot do these awful things, right? And the reason I'm telling you this is really simple. Their objective is to use you like livestock, right? You are a cog in the machine. We talk about you. You're a consumer. You're not an individual. You're a consumer. You exist to consume. Or you're a taxpayer. You exist to pay taxes. Or you're a military age or a service-aged male, right? These are the terms that we use to talk about people. They're not individuals who are free to make their own choices, live their own lives, experience their own actualities. They're just tools to be used to pay taxes or to consume or to fight our wars, right? That's wrong. Obviously, you all know you're individuals with your own goals and aspirations and dreams. And that's the most important and fundamental thing. And you've got to appreciate that the purpose of this apparatus that we call the media, the purpose of it is, always was, look into the history for yourself, don't take my words for it, always was, after the Industrial Revolution, we needed a way to control, it's what's called manufactured consent. We needed a way to control the outcomes of a quote-unquote democratic society. And what better way to do that than by quote-unquote building consensus using the media? That's what it is. You Google those terms for yourself and go through the history if you want. And so a lot of us look at the world today and we question, why is everyone so distracted? Like if you just focused on these things, your life would be better, right? The answer is that there is a multi-billion-dollar propaganda industry whose only purpose is to try to distract you from those things so that you will focus on the things they want you to focus on. So that's where you'll put your energy and your attention and your effort, right? And I'm not saying that because I want you to think in conspiratorial terms. I'm not saying that because I want you to think, oh, you know, the world, the Illuminati, the blah, 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 whoever's... No, none of that. I'm telling you that simply so that you are aware, you're on guard for what it is psychologically these things are trying to do. And a lot of times they're not consciously trying to do. They're not even, these people, they're not aware of what they're up to really. They're just kind of going through the motions. They don't know the history any better than you know the history, right? They're just going through the motions. But their objective, all the same, is to distract you, whether they recognize it or not, whether you recognize it or not. The most important thing about hiring a media personality is that you hire someone who sincerely believes what they're saying, well, regardless of whether or not it's true. They just need to sincerely believe what they're saying. You'll notice a lot of times with people in the media, they sincerely believe what they're saying, right? Because people who sincerely believe what they're saying are much more distracting than people who don't, right? For obvious reasons, right? So please understand this is your 24 hours. You choose how to use them. They're not mine. They're not Justin Trudeau's. They're not Vladimir Putin's. You know, all of these people and forces in the world who want your attention on them, understand you're not their priority. And if you take care of yourself first and you've done all the things that you need to do to make sure that you're okay, and then you want to spend some of your attention on Vlad or Justin or myself or whomever, by all means, go ahead, right? But again, I ask you, how much did you allow Vladimir Putin to interrupt you from making offers this week? Did you get worried about the future? Did you say, oh no, World War III's, why do I keep doing that? World War III is coming. Maybe it's not a good time to buy a house. Oh no, what will happen to the interest rates? Oh no, oh no, oh no. A lot of uncertainty all of a sudden entered into your life. And so now you're not certain how to act. Is today really different from yesterday? Right? Is this week really different from last week? Is the strategy that you were certain was going to work last week no longer relevant this week because Putin is invading a country and our country is doing whatever, right? Like, if you've got a good strategy, and certainly real estate investing is one, then it should work. People got rich investing in real estate during World War II. William Nickerson is a perfect example. He did, right? So if the world is going to go to World War III, doesn't change the fact that you should be invested in real estate. Doesn't change it at all. Doesn't change it at all. Maybe one of those real estate pieces you might buy as a bomb shelter. I don't know, right? But it really does not change the equation at all. And I think that that's very important. It's something I really wanted to say. I wanted to get off my chest. I think if you really look back on your life and you think about it, all of the conflicts that have happened in the last 30, 40 years have all been distractions. Again, not that they weren't real conflicts. They were, yeah. Osama bin Laden or somebody, anyways, really did fly planes into buildings. And, obviously they fought wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and things of that nature. And none of it is pretend or make believe. It's just, why are you focused on it? It's like one last analogy, and then I'll let you go. Take me back to high school. I remember my first day of high school. There was a drug dealing altercation, and some kids got into a fight, and one kid sledgehammered the other kid in the face. It was all over the news. It was a big deal. And kid ended up in the hospital, obviously. I mean, you take a sledgehammer to the face. That was my first day of high school. And I remember that very, very clearly. I didn't get a chance to see the fight, which is a shame, because, I mean, a kid pulls a sledgehammer out of his trunk and just clocks another kid in the face. That would have been something horrible, but also something to see, right? But I was thinking about like the schoolyard fight, the playground fight, right? Let's say you're in high school or maybe even university, but I guess most people aren't fighting in universities, right? You get to this point in your life and, I don't know, you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. Doesn't matter. You're trying to accomplish academically, right? And you're in class and, I don't know, Justin and Robert, they start pushing and shoving. They're getting into it. They're going to take it outside. I'll catch you in the parking lot after school, whatever cliches kids say these days. Now, if you're that good student, you've decided your goal is I'm going to be, I don't know, let's say a lawyer. I got to study hard. I got to get good grades. I got to pass my LSATs. I got to make it into school, right? How tempted are you to go watch Justin and Robert beat the crap out of each other in the parking lot? You ever notice that there's always a huge circle that forms around every single fight? Now, most of you probably aren't fighters. You probably don't like fighting. You maybe been in some fights reluctantly in your life, but they're not necessarily things that you seek out. Fighting is more or less dumb. And yet, you'll probably go and be distracted by the fight. I know I probably would be, right? It's a distraction. Conflict is a distraction. And now you're not focused on getting those grades to go to law school. Does it matter whether Justin beats up Robert or Robert beats up Justin? No. Does it matter how the fight ends? No. Do you need to see it? No. Do you need to participate in it? No. You probably will, though, because your little monkey brain is drawn into the conflict and the social drama, just like the rest of us. And we all need to understand that, right? We're fighting against that little monkey brain that wants to be in there stirring things up and looking for opportunities to climb the ladder socially when there's conflict. And what you need to understand is that our modern society is playing on that drive that's within you to keep you distracted and to keep you off balance so that you're not focused on your goals, right? And because for most people, if they focus on their goals, first of all, if they set reasonable goals, because a lot of people set very unreasonable goals, but if they set reasonable, manageable, actionable goals and they focus on them, most people would improve their lives immensely. In fact, most people do improve their lives immensely. They go from being kids who have nothing and know nothing into young adults who have nothing and know nothing, into adults who know a little bit of something and have a little bit of something. And even if many of them never make it past that point, that's a huge improvement from the kid who knew nothing and had nothing, right? So we do improve our lives. It's just that usually the effort stops at some point. We allow the distractions to take over. Some naturally, having children, a family, those are things that are going to naturally distract you. They take time and effort away from improving yourself. But other things that distract you because they're nonsense, because they're other people's conflict and you want to go crowd around them, right? And know that and be mindful of it. And I'm not saying put your head in the sand and be ignorant to the world or anything like that. You know, I struggle myself with the media because I recognize it's a very poisonous thing. But also, I do want to know what's happening in the world to some extent and where do you get that information from. So it's a balancing act. But, you know, just please remember to focus on the fact that you can really do incredible things, but you've got to go do them. And if you are always getting caught up in someone else's drama, then you're depriving the world of the opportunity to appreciate all of the good things that you can do for it. And you really, I mean, I know I sound so cheesy, but like you really can. I really do believe if I gave you a few $1 million and the wherewithal to use it well, that you'd use it for good things. Maybe you'd use it for some dumb things too, for sure, right? But for the most part, you do good with it. And so the only question now is how can we get those few $1 million in your hands so you can go do that good with it? Because right now we have an overabundance of people who seem to have access to resources, but there's no good intentions behind it. Right? There's no good intentions behind it, and that can be a very, very negative thing, right? Obviously, we're seeing that all over the world. So, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I hope, as always, it was at least illuminating and gave you something to think about. I hope you have a fantastic week. I know I'll spend at least some of it analyzing some property and looking at some deals. I found a house this week in Sudbury for like $250,000 for a triplex. Great pricing. Probably going to make an offer on it. So there are deals to be found if you're looking. You know, I definitely wish you the best. Oh, to be clear, I found this house. It is listed at like 244.9 or something like that, but it'll probably sell for 300 and something. So don't think it'll go that cheap. But I'll probably make an offer on and see what happens. Anyways, have a fantastic week, guys, and let me know if you have any questions or anything. You know, shoot me an email or text or what have you, and hopefully I'll see you all again next Sunday.